When I first met Sophia, it felt like meeting the bright side of the world for the first time. We connected online at a time when life felt ordinary and predictable. I'd spent most of my days working at the office and coming home to silence. Sophia's messages lit up that emptiness like sunrise through my window. She lived thousands of miles away, but I felt close to her instantly. She spoke about big dreams, exploring new cities, studying, starting a life together that would be better than the lives we had lived alone. Our conversations stretched into the night, filled with laughter, stories from our childhoods, and hopes neither of us had dared to say out loud before. It just made sense. Within a few months, the ocean between us started to feel like nothing more than a puddle, just another hurdle that could be crossed if we both reached out hard enough. As our bond grew, we both began to imagine a life together in my country, a place full of opportunities. Sophia would talk about the old buildings she wanted to see, the foods she was excited to taste, and how different it would be from her small hometown. She was tired of feeling stuck, always looking for something more. I wanted nothing more than to give her that more, to offer her a chance at happiness and a future we could both share. We made plans. We mapped out everything, down to the shade of paint we'd put on the walls in our supposed future living room. Little by little, what started as a long-distance conversation turned into hope that somehow, some way, we could rewrite the story of our lives together. It didn't matter to me how complicated it would be. I just knew I wanted to be the one by her side through it all, to take that leap and build a life that belonged to the both of us. It didn't take long for the reality of the distance between us to sink in. Every night, after we hung up, the feeling of emptiness would return, colder than before. Sophia and I both knew that if we wanted our love to be real, truly real, not just words and images floating between screens, we had to take a big step. She started looking into the process of coming to my country, and at first, it felt almost impossible. The rules were strict and confusing. There were so many kinds of visas, requirements, and forms, each with its own string of fine print. Sophia was overwhelmed, and honestly, so was I, but I told her we'd get through it together. She confessed to me, late one night, that she felt trapped in her hometown, that if she didn't take this chance, she'd regret it for the rest of her life. That's when I made my decision. I was going to do everything in my power to help her come here, no matter how hard or expensive it might be. I started gathering information relentlessly, reading articles, watching videos, even calling lawyers for advice. I spent spare hours sorting through paperwork, creating checklists, and writing my own explanations for every official question that might come up. Sophia and I had long calls where we filled out online forms together, trying to make no mistakes. I offered to write letters confirming our relationship, to ask friends for references, anything that would help her case. Even as the pile of expenses grew, legal fees, document translations, travel costs, I refused to let that shake my commitment. I dipped into my savings without thinking twice, trusting that every sacrifice would be worth it once I could finally hold her hand for real. Some people told me I was crazy or naive, that I was investing too much in someone I'd never met in person, but I pushed their doubts aside. For me, helping Sophia get her visa wasn't just an act of love, it was a promise that I believed in our story, and in the life I saw waiting on the other side of this struggle. The challenges started almost immediately. Each step in the visa process came with its own fresh set of rules, deadlines, and stumbling blocks. The official websites were confusing, and every answer seemed to lead to more questions. I found myself triple-checking instructions just to be sure we didn't miss a single requirement. Some forms asked for paperwork Sophia didn't even know existed, like obscure certificates from her hometown we had to get translated and notarized. There were days when she'd call me in tears because another document was wrong, or a government office in her country claimed they needed a stamp that no one could find. I tried my best to hide my own frustration, even though the stress was eating at me too. There was always this fear that we'd do something wrong and get her barred from applying again. Just gathering proof that our relationship was real felt like putting our love on trial for strangers, collecting photos, screenshots of messages, shared travel plans, all just to convince someone in an office that what we had mattered. There were also moments when it seemed like the process would never end. The embassy set appointments weeks or even months apart, and every delay felt like a year stolen from our lives together. I lost count of the hours I spent waiting on hold with lawyers or customer service agents, asking the same questions over and over, and sometimes getting answers that contradicted each other. Sometimes the stress would spill over, causing arguments between Sophia and me, as if we both were getting stretched too thin, desperate to believe that all the small sacrifices and sleepless nights would pay off. I watched her struggle against doubt and loneliness on her end, while I battled my own anxieties at home. But I held on to the idea that every hurdle was one step closer to starting our life together. I kept telling myself that none of this would matter once Sophia was finally here. That belief became my anchor as the paperwork, stress, and obstacles continued to pile up, almost daring us to give up. Even though the process dragged on and tested our patience, there was always a glimmer of hope pushing us forward. Every time we finished a batch of paperwork or finally got a stamp on one of Sophia's documents, it felt like a small victory worth celebrating. On days when things seemed impossible, we would talk late into the night about all the plans we had for the future, the places we'd visit, cooking dinners together in a tiny kitchen, even just going for walks after work instead of ending every day alone. These moments filled me with a kind of hope that made all the struggle seem worth it. Even the long silences while waiting for embassy responses were bearable, as long as we could imagine Sophia's arrival on the next flight. The pictures in my head of meeting her at the airport for the first time kept me motivated. Each update, each email from the embassy or from our lawyer, made my heart race. I started to dream about the ordinary things, her voice echoing off my walls, her laughter in my living room, because I wanted those ordinary, shared moments more than anything. Sophia's hope kept me afloat too. She sent me voice messages where she sounded nervous but always excited, asking me if I thought she would finally be approved. Sometimes she told me that just picturing us together helped her get through the longest days. We encouraged each other, even on days when the waiting became almost unbearable. I could tell her own family doubted it would ever work, but we promised each other not to give up. I put that promise in writing, texting it to her, so she could read it back to herself when the waiting felt endless. For both of us, hope became a habit, almost a kind of discipline. We learned how to imagine the future together, even when the present was full of stress and obstacles. That stubborn, shared expectation that something good was coming became the thread that held us together. As the paperwork slowly made its way through the system, my faith in us kept growing stronger. Every step forward in the process became another brick in the world we were building together, even if we had to do most of it apart. The day we got the news that Sophia's visa was approved is stamped in my memory forever. I woke up early and, out of habit, checked my email before even getting out of bed. There it was, sitting at the top of my inbox, an official message from the embassy, subject line marked, "Approved." For a moment, I just stared at the screen, not trusting my own eyes. My heart hammered in my chest, and I blinked hard, reading the words over and over, letting them sink in. All the endless nights, the worry, the paperwork, the phone calls, it was all behind us now. Our dream wasn't just a possibility anymore, it was real. Hands trembling, I called Sophia, barely able to get the words out. I could hear the disbelief in her voice turn quickly into cries of joy. She laughed and cried at the same time, repeating that she couldn't believe it, that she was really coming. I just sat there grinning, every fear and doubt melting away into something as close to pure happiness as I'd ever felt. We celebrated right then and there, even though we were still thousands of miles apart. Sophia sent me photos of the approval letter, holding it up with the biggest smile I'd ever seen on her face. I ordered coffee and pastries from her favorite place in town and had them delivered to her door as a surprise. We spent hours on video chat, imagining how it would feel to finally close that distance, planning all the little things we wanted to do. I even went out that night with my closest friends to share the news, and they lifted a glass to us, saying the hardest part was over now. For those few days I felt lighter than air. The world felt full of promise again. Every worry or hesitation was drowned out by this wave of excitement and relief that after everything, we'd actually made it. We were no longer just two people hoping for a future. Now it was just a matter of counting down the days until Sophia could finally step off that plane and start the life we'd fought so hard for. The day Sophia arrived felt like the start of a whole new life. Not just for her, but for me too. I remember waiting at the airport, heart pounding, with flowers in my hand and 1,000 thoughts racing through my mind. Every time the doors slid open and another traveler appeared, I held my breath, searching for her face in the crowd. When I finally saw her, it was as if the world paused. She ran into my arms, and everything we had been through to reach this moment disappeared in a rush of happiness and relief. For the first time, I wasn't looking at her through a screen. Her laughter filled the busy terminal, and her eyes had the same spark I'd seen in our endless video calls. All the plans we'd made, walking through new neighborhoods, sharing dinners, simply living side by side, suddenly felt real, not just dreams floating between messages. Over the next few days, everything was about discovering this new city together. Sophia was curious about everything: the way people talked, the taste of new foods, how the sunsets looked from my small apartment window. We fell into a rhythm that felt natural, sharing routines, talking about our goals, and exploring what life could really be like now that the distance was gone. She reminded me every day how grateful she was, telling me that this was the start of her freedom and our shared future. At night, we would sit on the couch, planning our weekends and what little changes we would make to turn my apartment into our home. Every conversation was full of promises, supporting each other, growing stronger together, never letting each other down. In those moments, it felt like all the effort, worry, and sacrifice had truly been worth it. The dreams we clung to during those long, lonely nights were finally coming to life around us, and I believed with everything in me that nothing could pull us apart. At first, I thought the change in Sophia was just a natural part of settling into a new country. She was quieter some days, often lost in thought or distracted by her phone. I would come home from work ready to share stories about my day, but she was sometimes absent-minded, barely looking up from whatever she was doing. I caught myself explaining little things about daily life again and again, just to be met with a forced smile or a quick nod. Our conversations grew shorter. Instead of dreaming together each night, she often wanted to go to sleep early or scroll through her phone with her back turned. She said the adjustment was hard, that she was just tired, and I believed her for a while. I made excuses for her withdrawal, reminding myself she had left her entire world behind, but it started to feel like the distance between us was growing, even though we were now just a few feet apart in the same room. Soon, little things started to stand out and gnaw at me. Sophia stopped making plans with me on weekends, saying she was too exhausted or wanted alone time. When friends invited us out, she'd decline and urge me to go by myself. She picked up new habits, spending hours chatting with people I didn't know, and avoiding questions whenever I asked who she was talking to. Sometimes I would walk into the room and she'd quickly hide her phone, saying it was just her family checking in, but her voice sounded different from before, more guarded, less open. There were moments when I caught confusion or even irritation in her eyes if I suggested simple shared activities like cooking or taking a walk. I tried not to make too much of it, blaming it on nerves or the stress of starting over. But in my gut, I could feel a shift. The loving, excited partner I'd waited months to be with seemed to be fading away right in front of me, and I didn't know what I was supposed to do to bring us back to the happiness we'd promised each other. The emotional distance between Sophia and me became more obvious with each passing week. It was in the small things at first: a quiet dinner where she barely spoke, a hug that felt half-hearted, her laughter sounding forced or fading too fast. I found myself reaching out more just to feel some shred of warmth or closeness, often coming up empty. As I tried to surprise her with a favorite snack or a small trip out, her responses became polite, almost mechanical, instead of excited or grateful the way they used to be. The apartment, once filled with movement and energy as we settled into our routines, grew quieter and colder. There was an uneasy silence most evenings, as if an invisible wall had been built that I couldn't find a way over or through. I would lie awake at night, replaying our old conversations, trying to figure out what had changed or what I'd missed. That's when the doubts began to creep in, slowly at first, but powerful enough to keep me awake more nights than I care to admit. I questioned myself constantly. Had I pushed too hard for her to like my country, to adjust too quickly, to make everything perfect? Was I not enough now that she finally had her freedom and the chance to create a new life? On the rare days I tried to ask those questions out loud, Sophia would give vague answers or change the subject, and I'd be left feeling even more lost. Sometimes I wondered if she regretted coming, if the stories we dreamed up from opposite sides of the world were never meant to survive real life. I started paying attention to little things I'd ignored before. Her subtle glances at her phone, the way she avoided eye contact, how carefully she guarded her thoughts. The doubts twisted inside me and left me anxious, tiptoeing around the apartment, afraid of saying something to finally push her away for good. It was a painful, confusing time, loving someone who seemed to have already started letting go. I tried again and again to reach Sophia, desperate to save what we had before it slipped away completely. I thought that maybe if we just talked openly, we could figure out what was making her so distant. One evening, after another silent dinner, I finally found the courage to ask her how she was really feeling. I told her I could sense something was wrong, that I missed the closeness we shared, and that if there was something on her mind, I truly wanted to understand and help. She stared at me for a long moment, searching for words, and then looked down at her hands. "I'm just tired," she said quietly, offering me a weak smile. She insisted that adjusting to a new life was harder than she'd imagined, that she needed time and space to feel at home. I wanted to believe her, so I tried to give her that space, even though the silence between us kept growing heavier. After that, every attempt to talk seemed to go the same way. I would ask gentle questions, hoping we could open up to each other like we used to, but Sophia only pulled further away. She began avoiding conversations altogether, going to bed earlier, or making excuses to be out of the apartment. When I asked if she was unhappy or if she regretted moving, she would brush it off or act defensive, changing the subject or getting frustrated. I started to feel like I was the problem, as if my worry and longing for answers were only pushing her further away. I read books and articles about culture shock and relationships, searching for anything that might help bridge the gap between us, but nothing seemed to break through her new wall. Sometimes, I'd sit alone in the living room, phone in hand, staring at old photos of when we laughed and planned a future together. All I wanted was a real conversation, with honesty, even if it hurt, so we could fix what was broken. Instead, all I found was more distance, and a growing sense of helplessness I couldn't shake. The doubts that had been swirling in my mind took a sharper shape when I started noticing strange things about Sophia's behavior. It was subtle at first. A quick glance at her phone whenever a notification popped up, her smile that seemed a little too eager at certain moments, her insistence on changing her passwords and locking her screen whenever she left the room. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, that I was being paranoid because things were already tense between us. But the feeling wouldn't go away. One night, I walked into the living room and saw her hurriedly put her phone face down on the table, as if she didn't want me to see the screen. She said she was just chatting with a friend from home, but her tone was too defensive, her forehead creased with worry instead of comfort. The logical part of me tried to trust her, but the part of me that was hurt and desperate for answers couldn't help but wonder if there was more going on. A few days later, my fears were confirmed in the most painful way. Sophia left her phone charging on the kitchen counter and stepped outside to take a call. As the screen lit up, a string of messages appeared, names I didn't know, conversations that sounded too intimate to be about old friends checking in. My heart raced, my hands froze, but I couldn't look away. There were messages about meeting up, talk of secrets kept from me, words that should have been shared between partners, not exchanged with strangers. When Sophia came back and saw the expression on my face, she immediately snatched her phone and stormed off, accusing me of invading her privacy. But the damage was done. The trust between us, already shaky, was now splintered. I felt betrayed not just by what I saw, but by the lies she'd told me every time I'd asked if something was wrong. I realized then that the walls she'd built weren't just for protection or adjustment. They were hiding something she never intended for me to see. The day Sophia left was nothing like I had imagined when I first fought so hard to bring her here. There was no dramatic argument or explanation, just a quiet morning, where she gathered her things while I stood there, numb and confused. She told me she needed time alone, that she couldn't do this anymore, and before I could find the words to respond, She was gone. The apartment that once felt filled with hope and promise now echoed with an emptiness I'd never experienced before. I sat on our couch, surrounded by the reminders of the life we had started to build. Her mug half finished on the table, the blanket she chose for our movie nights, a few photographs of better days, trying to piece together what had happened. It felt like the world had shrunk down to the size of those four walls, trapping me inside my own disappointment and disbelief. The most crushing part of it all was how quickly everything we had shared was erased, almost as if it had never mattered to her at all. I tried to call her, text her, ask for a chance to talk things through, but she ignored every attempt. Friends tried to comfort me, but their words felt hollow. How could they understand the magnitude of this betrayal when they hadn't seen the hours, the sacrifices, the genuine love I'd poured into making a future possible for us? The victory I once celebrated, the approval, the reunion, the first days together, had turned into something that felt like a cruel joke. Instead of finally being rewarded for all my hope and effort, I was left feeling used and discarded, as if my only role in her story was to help her reach a new place before she moved on without me. I kept searching for meaning in her actions, hoping there was an explanation that would make the pain less sharp, but the only thing that remained was the empty silence she left behind. In the days and weeks after Sophia left, guilt settled over me like a heavy blanket I couldn't shake off. I questioned every single decision I had made, the way I'd welcomed her, the money and time I'd invested, the hope I'd carried for both of us. Every detail of our story replayed in my head, like a movie I couldn't turn off. I wondered if I'd been too eager or too trusting. Had I missed warning signs that things weren't right? Was my support too much or not enough? I started to doubt myself in ways I never had before, wondering if I was simply unlovable or bound to fail at what mattered most. Even mundane things, like hearing couples laugh in the street or seeing someone waiting at arrivals in the airport, made the ache come back harder. I blamed myself for letting the dream get so big, for believing with all my heart that love and sacrifice alone could pave the way for happiness. At night, the silence in the apartment was overwhelming. I replayed every conversation, looking for the point where I could have done something different. Maybe I should have given her more freedom, or pushed less for us to connect. Maybe I was blind to what she really wanted, so caught up in my hope that I ignored her unhappiness. The guilt twisted into self-doubt, making me afraid to open up to anyone else, or even trust my own judgment. I scrolled through our old photos and messages, not out of nostalgia, but searching for the moment when things started to fall apart, some clue that would prove I could have prevented this. My mind spun in circles, never coming up with real answers, only more questions and regrets. It was a lonely kind of pain, being left not just by the person I loved, but also by the confidence I once had in myself. Slowly, guilt and self-doubt seeped into all parts of my life, and I started to wonder if I'd ever find my way out of it. It was a shock to realize that while I was pouring my effort into saving what we had, Sophia was already planning her exit. The truth came out slowly in bits and pieces. Not a confession, but a pattern that unfolded the more I replayed certain moments in my mind. Things I had brushed off suddenly took on new meaning. I remembered her spending more and more time texting people she never wanted to talk about, hesitating when I suggested we make plans for the future. I would find her quietly searching for jobs or apartments online, something she used to include me in, but now hid as soon as I walked in the room. At the time, I'd told myself she was only seeking independence in a new country, but my heart knew there was more to it than that. Looking back, every sign pointed to her slowly drifting away, while I was still fighting with everything I had to keep us together. The realization hit harder because it made me see how alone I had been in our struggle. While I was exhausting myself with hope and compromise, she was quietly building a life apart from me, brick by brick. Friends who had seen her out and about mentioned her acting distant, spending more time with new people than with me. I found small clues, a draft of a roommate ad saved on her laptop, unexplained charges for ride shares across town, messages from someone offering to help her settle in without me. Each discovery felt like reclaiming a piece of the truth, but also like losing another piece of myself. The hardest part was understanding she'd been looking for a way out long before she finally left. I realized that all my efforts and love had been met not with partnership, but with a quiet, steady retreat. It made the betrayal sting even more, to know that I wasn't just abandoned, but that she had plotted her escape while letting me believe we were still in this together. The truth about Sophia's growing distance finally came to light in the most painful way possible. One evening, a mutual friend reached out to me, hesitantly sharing something he thought I needed to know. He'd run into Sophia at a cafe across town, and she hadn't been alone. She was sitting close with someone I had never met, laughing with him the way she used to laugh with me, sharing private glances and little touches that said more than words ever could. At first I doubted it, thinking maybe it was just a misunderstanding. But when I asked Sophia, her reaction confirmed everything. She grew angry and defensive, telling me it wasn't my business, insisting that she deserved to build a life however she wanted. In that moment, I wasn't even sure who she had become, but it was clear that my place in her world had been replaced by someone else before she ever told me why. Piecing together the last months, everything finally started to make sense. The secretive messages, her sudden bursts of happiness when her phone buzzed, her late nights out and her detachment from me. Each piece hurt on its own, but the total picture was crushing. She hadn't just grown apart from me. She had found someone to step into the space I'd hoped to fill with trust and love. It stung to realize she'd allowed me to believe in a shared future, while she was already moving on with someone else behind my back. I kept replaying memories of our early days, trying to find any warning sign I'd overlooked, any hint that I wasn't enough. But there was no comfort in the past, just the sharp sting of reality. The person I loved had left long before she ever packed her things, and the truth was I had been fighting for someone who was already gone. The hardest part was letting myself accept what she wouldn't admit, that there was room in her life for someone new, but not for me. After hearing the truth from our friend and seeing the change in Sophia myself, I couldn't keep pretending everything was normal. I waited until a quiet evening when we were both home, trying to hold back my anger and sadness, determined to have a real conversation about what was happening. I looked her in the eyes and told her what I knew, about our friend seeing her with someone else, about the secretive messages and her sudden changes. The words were heavy, but they were true, and I hoped she would finally come clean or at least explain herself. Instead, Sophia's reaction hurt even more than the truth itself. She didn't meet me with honesty or regret. She twisted my words, accused me of being controlling and paranoid, saying I was inventing stories to make her feel guilty about moving on. She declared that I was the one suffocating her, that everything falling apart was my fault for not giving her the space and freedom she deserved. The more I pressed for honesty, the deeper she retreated into manipulation. She said I was exaggerating, that people were trying to poison me against her, and claimed I was misinterpreting innocent situations. When I asked about her late nights and the messages I'd seen, she accused me of invading her privacy and making her feel unsafe. Each answer left me feeling smaller, as if I was the one who had ruined what we had, rather than the person who had been betrayed. Part of me wanted to believe her, desperate for any version of the story that didn't end in heartbreak. But whenever she denied what I already knew, it added to the confusion and pain, making me question what was real. I saw how she skillfully turned every accusation back onto me so that I would doubt myself and stop pushing for the truth. Even then, with everything out in the open, her refusal to admit what she'd done left me frozen, sadder than if she'd just been honest, and struggling to hold on to the last pieces of my self-respect. After that last fight, the apartment grew even colder and more silent than before. I found myself sinking into a fog of sadness, the likes of which I'd never known. Every morning felt heavy, and simple routines like brushing my teeth or making breakfast became small battles against exhaustion and emptiness. I lost interest in things that once made me happy. Hobbies, favorite shows, even catching up with friends. I stopped answering their calls and messages, ashamed of the wreck that my life had become, and convinced that I had no words left to explain what I was feeling. The world outside kept moving, but I was living in slow motion, stuck replaying the hurtful words from our last conversation and the betrayal that unraveled everything I had believed in. The trust I'd put in another person, and in myself, was shattered, leaving me restless and alone in my own mind. Loneliness crept in like a shadow that stretched into every corner of my life. The apartment, decorated with little touches of our shared plans, felt less like a home and more like a museum of broken promises. Each room held memories of better days, a laughing meal at the kitchen table, a quiet night watching movies, even her shoes piled by the door. The pain of those memories kept me from moving forward, and so I stopped trying. I'd barely left the house, only going out when I absolutely had to, avoiding places we'd gone together. Nights were the worst, when the silence became too much to bear and all the emotions I pushed down during the day came flooding back. Sleep offered no escape. My mind would wake me with dreams of what I'd lost, and I'd lie there, staring at the empty side of the bed. In those weeks of deep sadness and isolation, it felt impossible to believe I'd ever find happiness or hope again. During that dark stretch of loneliness, I started thinking back over every part of our relationship, trying to understand how things had gone so wrong. I realized that there had always been invisible cracks beneath the surface, even in moments when I thought we were closest. Looking at it honestly, I could see how the whole connection between us had been built on promises that were either vague or never really meant to last. Sophia had said all the right things. About our future, about her love, about wanting to share her life with me, but her actions so often pointed elsewhere. Whenever there was conflict, or she needed comfort, she withheld more than she gave. Whenever we had to make decisions together, she pushed away, insisting that she needed space, or that I was holding her back, making me question my own good intentions. Instead of partnership, I often found myself walking on eggshells, afraid that any misstep would make her mood turn or push her further away. The promises she made about staying, building a home, and sharing her dreams now felt like tools to keep me hopeful and devoted, even as she slowly disconnected from our life together. I started to understand that what I'd called love may have been a story I told myself, a hope that, if I tried hard enough, she'd finally meet me halfway. I saw how she twisted moments to make me feel responsible for her unhappiness, always offering just enough warmth or affection to keep me believing, never enough to truly let me in. The relationship was draining, always taking from me without ever refilling what it cost. What stung most wasn't just the lies or the betrayal. It was realizing I'd been so lost in trying to keep those promises alive that I ignored my own needs and value. It was humbling and painful, accepting that the life I'd built around her had been shaped by illusions and wishful thinking. But in that acceptance, I started to see that I deserved better than what we had. The turning point came slowly but surely, buried beneath the pain and confusion. After weeks of feeling powerless, I realized I couldn't stay trapped in that sadness forever. I began to ask myself different questions, not about how I could have saved the relationship, but about what I deserved moving forward and why I was willing to settle for less. I needed to know the truth, not just for closure, but to reclaim my own peace of mind. Sitting alone one evening, I promised myself I would no longer let guilt or fear control my life. I would seek answers, even the ones that might hurt, because I was tired of living in a fog of half-truths and suspicion. It was time to see Sophia, and what happened between us, with clear eyes. That small decision gave me more strength than I'd felt in a long time. It started with simple steps, talking to people who had seen what was happening, rereading messages, and finally facing the reality I'd tried to avoid. With each truth I uncovered, the weight inside me started to lift. I learned that searching for answers wasn't about punishing Sophia or wallowing in old wounds, but about freeing myself from the power her secrets had over me. I reached out to friends and even people who were on the sidelines of our story, asking them gently but directly if they knew more than they'd shared. It was hard, and sometimes the truth hurt more than the not knowing, but it also pushed me to stand taller and trust my instincts. For the first time in months, I started focusing on my own life, getting back to work, taking care of my health, putting energy into things and people who actually cared about me. I realized that even though the story with Sophia was written in disappointment, the next chapters could belong to me. I was finally ready to reclaim my pride and start again, armed with the truth instead of haunted by it. That was the moment I began to see that my life didn't have to be defined by betrayal, and that I was stronger than I'd ever given myself credit for. Once I made up my mind to get to the bottom of things, I started looking at my relationship with Sophia in a new way. I revisited old conversations and messages with fresh eyes, searching for hidden clues that I'd missed the first time. Patterns began to appear. Moments when her affection cooled suddenly. Times when her excuses didn't quite line up. Places she said she was going but couldn't explain later. I compared dates and stories, and slowly, a timeline of her slow pull-away started to form in my mind. At first it hurt to see the little ways she'd been drifting from me long before she actually left, but with every new detail, some of my confusion and self-blame began to fade. I reminded myself that I wasn't digging for drama. I needed answers for my own peace. Every piece of the puzzle brought me closer to understanding the truth I deserved, no matter how difficult it was to face. My investigation didn't stop at just looking back on our digital history. I talked to friends who'd seen things I hadn't, both mine and hers. Some people hesitated at first, not wanting to get involved or make things worse, but as I explained that I only wanted honesty, they began to open up. One friend told me about seeing Sophia at different places around the city, often with people I'd never met. Another mentioned hearing her talk about new friends and opportunities, always without mentioning me. Through these conversations, I learned that Sophia had begun forming her new life much earlier than I realized. All of this was hard to hear, but the truth finally started to settle in. I felt a strange sense of relief with each confirmation. Yes, things had really gone wrong, and no, it wasn't all in my head. Piece by piece, the full story became clear, and it was no longer just a story about betrayal, but about my own courage to finally face reality and move forward. As I dug deeper, I began to find out even more about Sophia's life before she met me, things she'd never talked about or only mentioned in passing. A mutual acquaintance from her home country reached out, troubled by how things had ended between us and wanting to give me some answers. She told me that Sophia had a history of restlessness, of never really settling in one place or holding on to relationships for long. In her old life, Sophia would often jump from one connection to the next, always looking for something better or more exciting. Her dreams of moving abroad weren't just about starting a life with someone she loved, but also about escaping situations and people that made her feel trapped. For the first time, it became clear that I wasn't her rescue or her partner in adventure. I was her opportunity, a means to an end she'd been chasing long before we ever said, "I love you." This revelation hurt, but it also explained so much. The way she had slipped away from me without warning, the false promises of forever, and the easy comfort she seemed to find with someone new. All of it fit the pattern of someone who never planned on staying anywhere for long. Looking at our story through this lens, I realized I had only seen the pieces of her that she wanted me to see. The vulnerable, adventurous side, the longing for a new start, the warm partner she pretended to be. Her real motives were never about our shared future, but about freedom and a fresh start at any cost, even if that meant breaking my heart. In a strange way, seeing her true self helped me let go. I stopped blaming myself or believing I'd failed. I understood that the hole she left in my life wasn't because I wasn't good enough, but because she was never truly committed to building something real with anyone. Knowing her real reasons for leaving lifted a weight off my shoulders. The pain was still there, but it was finally mixed with relief and the permission to move on for good. The final blow came when I learned the real reason Sophia had fought so hard to come here. As I was untangling everything she left behind, an old message from one of her friends popped up on her laptop, a message she must have forgotten to delete or thought I'd never see. It was months old, from before her move, and it spelled out their plan openly. Sophia talked about getting a visa with my help so she could have more opportunities, not just a new life with me. Her friend encouraged her, writing that she should do whatever necessary to secure her independence and ensure she had options once she arrived. My stomach dropped as I read those words, the signs I'd ignored, the urgency she had about the visa process, the way our relationship became all about paperwork and timelines, suddenly made perfect sense. All my sacrifices, my patience, my trust in her story of love, had simply been a means for her to get something she wanted. When the shock and anger faded, what lingered was a deep sadness I can't quite describe. I had believed in our love, believed that all the hard work and hope were pointed at a shared dream. but the painful truth was that her heart was never really in it. She needed a way out of her old life, and I was just the doorway. The benefits she gained, a visa, a new job, a fresh start, came at the cost of my trust and peace. It stung to realize that she had used our relationship for personal gain, not because she wanted to build a lasting bond with me. The hardest part was facing how deliberately she'd gone about it, planning and leveraging my feelings to open doors she couldn't have opened on her own. But this was also the wake-up call I needed. It pushed me to stop searching for ways to blame myself, and once and for all, to let go of the illusion that what we had was ever truly about love. Once the truth finally shattered all my illusions, something inside me changed. I couldn't stay stuck in that sadness, or keep letting what Sophia did control my mind and my life. I started thinking ahead for the first time in months about what I could do to reclaim my dignity and protect myself from any more damage. The betrayal had been painful, but I realized I didn't have to accept being her stepping stone or let her walk away without consequences. I began researching my rights and responsibilities, especially since I was the one who had sponsored her visa. I learned that in some cases, if someone used false intentions to gain entry or stay in a country, the authorities took it seriously. It was overwhelming at first to go through legal documents and talk to lawyers, but with every fact I gathered, my strength returned a little more. I wanted to make sure I wasn't left carrying her burdens, either financially or emotionally, after everything she'd put me through. Taking action wasn't just about the law, it was about taking back control of my own story. I started documenting everything, gathering evidence of her real motives and behavior, so I could show the truth if questioned. I also opened up to a few close friends about what really happened, letting them support and guide me so I wouldn't fall back into isolation or shame. Beyond the legal aspect, I set myself new goals, rebuilding my daily routine, getting back to what made me feel alive, and making choices that put my own needs first for a change. With each decision, I felt more like myself again, strong, resourceful, and determined not to let one person's betrayal define me forever. Even as I faced the stressful process ahead, I saw that fighting back, emotionally and legally, was not just about Sophia or what I lost, but about proving to myself that I was worth protecting, and that I could write an ending to this story that fit my own sense of justice and hope. Standing up for myself meant facing a whole new set of challenges, and some days it felt like I was David going up against Goliath, but I was done letting fear, confusion, or embarrassment keep me quiet. I gathered all the emails, messages, and paperwork that showed exactly what had happened. How Sophia's intentions changed, how she used my support for her own benefit, and how little of our relationship had been genuine near the end. With everything organized, I reached out to immigration officials and explained my side, showing clear evidence that I had sponsored her out of love and honesty, but that she had abused that trust for personal gain. There were interviews to go through, forms to fill out, and endless questions, but this time, every answer I gave was one step closer to freedom. I also made sure to protect myself financially, finding out how to separate my accounts and legally distance myself from any ties she'd created while we were together. What kept me going was knowing I wasn't just fighting for myself but also for the truth to be seen. Sophia had built a new life on top of lies, and I refused to let that stand without challenge. When people around us, friends, acquaintances, even colleagues who heard gossip, asked, I shared what I could, calmly and honestly. The exposure was difficult because I knew not everyone would understand or believe me, but I also realized their opinions weren't as important as my own peace. Every step I took, even the hard or awkward ones, made it clear that I wouldn't be her silent victim. In the end, the process to protect my rights and bring her actions to light gave me a sense of power I hadn't felt in a long time. I was reminded that I had the right to defend myself and stand up for what was fair. No matter how strong the system or confusing the red tape, I refused to give up. Little by little, I started to see that justice was possible, even when it meant going through battles I never asked for. Exposing the truth about Sophia wasn't something I did out of revenge. It was about setting things right and protecting others from falling into the same trap. Once I had all the evidence carefully documented, I focused on being transparent wherever I could. When people reached out, especially those who had heard rumors, I didn't shy away from explaining what really happened. I shared screenshots and emails with those who needed to see them, making sure to stick to the facts and avoid anger or bitterness. I made it clear that my goal was not to humiliate Sophia, but to prevent her from repeating her pattern of manipulation with someone else. Word traveled quickly among our network of friends and colleagues, and slowly I saw that people began to understand my side. Even people who had once doubted me or blamed me for the breakup started to realize that I was the one who had been honest from the start. Alongside speaking out to those around us, I continued working with authorities, providing detailed timelines, messages, and proof of her intentions. I asked for help from my lawyer when things got complicated, never hesitating to defend my perspective even if it meant reliving the pain. Each time I shared my story, whether in a meeting, an email, or a difficult conversation, I became stronger and more sure of myself. It took courage to confront lies head-on and speak the truth when it would have been easier to just move on silently. But standing up for myself became its own kind of justice. I learned to hold my head high, knowing I had done everything I could to reclaim my name and my peace. That new strength helped me rebuild my reputation, reminding both myself and everyone else that honesty deserves to be valued. Exposing the lies didn't erase all the hurt, but seeing justice begin to play out was proof that sometimes you have to fight for the closure and respect you deserve. Winning back, my confidence didn't happen all at once. It came through small, unexpected victories that slowly restored my faith in myself. The first was just being able to speak up without shame, sharing my side of the story and realizing I didn't have to hide from the truth anymore. I stopped blaming myself for Sophia's choices and became less afraid of running into people who knew what happened. Simple moments, like a friend texting me to say they understood now, or someone at work pulling me aside to offer support, lifted a bit of the weight I'd been carrying. Even tiny acts, like organizing my apartment and throwing away the last reminders of our life together, felt empowering. I remembered how capable I was before this relationship, and with each decision to protect myself and be honest, that part of me grew stronger again. As the weeks passed, every little win became proof that I could move forward. When I managed to separate my finances and tie up the legal ends, I felt relief and pride. Setting healthy boundaries with people, saying no without guilt, and choosing activities I genuinely enjoyed gave me back a sense of control. The anxiety and self-doubt that had haunted me for so long started to fade, replaced by a quiet trust in my own judgment. I rediscovered laughter with old friends and began to take care of my health. I no longer felt haunted every time I walked past our favorite cafes or heard her name in conversation. Each of these victories, no matter how minor, reminded me that my story wasn't over. Piece by piece, my confidence and dignity returned, proving to me that real healing is less about forgetting the pain and more about choosing to stand up, again and again, no matter how badly you've been hurt. When the truth about Sophia's actions came out, the ripple effect reached far beyond just the two of us. People in our circle were shocked. They had seen her as charming and honest, someone who wanted a fresh start. As the details spread, those who once supported her began to distance themselves, unsure of what to believe at first, but unable to ignore the facts as they piled up. Some friendships she built after moving here faded away. Even people she met through work and community events pulled back when they learned how carefully she had planned her moves. It was painful for her, I'm sure, to lose the support she counted on to start anew. The trust she had quickly built was replaced by awkward silences and judgmental glances. It turned out that starting over in a new place came with consequences, especially when honesty wasn't part of the foundation. Over time, the social fallout became hard for her to escape. I heard from mutual friends that Sophia found it difficult to connect with people now. Her new friends hesitated to include her in close gatherings, wary of letting someone in who had already deceived so many. The very opportunities she had come searching for slowly slipped away, as her reputation changed from hopeful newcomer to someone known for manipulation. She tried at first to defend herself, to spread her own side of the story, But even those who wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt became careful around her. In the end, the web of lies she had woven began to unravel in every direction, isolating her in the very place she thought would give her freedom. Seeing the truth play out wasn't about revenge for me. It was simply reality setting in, showing that actions always have consequences, especially when you build your future on broken trust. Rebuilding my life after such a deep betrayal took time, patience, and a level of self-forgiveness I hadn't known I was capable of. The first step was letting myself feel everything, even the painful emotions I'd tried to bury. I spent time journaling, venting to close friends, and letting the hurt run its course instead of pretending it didn't matter. It wasn't easy to trust myself again, especially after spending so long doubting every instinct. But slowly, I began to notice the little moments that made me feel alive. The warmth of sunlight in the morning, a good meal cooked just for myself, a full night's sleep without replaying old arguments in my head. I returned to the hobbies I once loved, long bike rides, playing the guitar, exploring the city without a shadow hanging over me. Each small accomplishment, each step outside my comfort zone, reminded me that I could move ahead. The weight on my chest began to fade, replaced by a quiet, steady sense of hope. Alongside my emotional recovery, I focused on rebuilding the practical side of my life. I took care of the legal loose ends, making sure I was protected and free from any fallout tied to Sophia's actions. I organized my finances, set new personal goals, and reached out to people who truly cared about me, even if our relationships had become distant during the hardest times. I learned to set boundaries with others and with myself so that I would never let someone take advantage of my trust that way again. Gradually, my apartment transformed too. What once looked like a museum of heartbreak became a space that reflected who I was, independent from the past. Rebuilding wasn't just about getting back to where I was before Sophia. It was about creating a stronger, wiser, and more resilient version of myself. Every lesson from the pain became a building block for a life that belonged, finally, to me. Relearning how to trust didn't happen right away, but support from others made all the difference. In the weeks after everything ended, a few friends refused to let me disappear, even when I tried to push them away. They showed up with groceries and jokes, invited me out to their favorite haunts, and listened without judgment when I finally started to talk. I realized that letting people in didn't have to mean risking another heartbreak. Sometimes, just having someone who genuinely listens is enough to soften your defenses. Through these simple moments, sharing a laugh over dinner, venting about small frustrations, or even just sitting in silence, I started to rebuild my faith in friendship. These connections reminded me that not everyone comes into your life with an agenda, and that most people are capable of real kindness and loyalty. As time went on, I even found myself opening up to making new connections with coworkers at the office, neighbors in my building, and strangers who became friends through hobbies and shared interests. At first I was cautious, always looking for signs that someone might take advantage of my trust. But, to my surprise, the majority of people welcomed me without judgment or expectations. Their trustworthiness and warmth helped me slowly shed the suspicion and protectiveness that Sophia's betrayal had built up inside me. They celebrated my small victories as if they were their own, and encouraged me to dream again, even if those dreams look different now. Each new friendship was proof that trust doesn't need to be given blindly, but it can still be given and received. The more I allowed myself to connect with others, the more I realized that life moves forward not just through justice or closure, but through genuine relationships that help us become whole again. There came a quiet moment in the middle of all my rebuilding when I finally had to sit down and face what I had truly lost. It wasn't just the relationship with Sophia that was gone. It was the future I had planned, the promises I had believed, and the version of my life that once seemed so certain. I realized I had been clinging to the hope that things could somehow return to the way they were, but deep down, I knew that door was firmly closed. Accepting that was painful, like letting go of a part of myself I'd tried so hard to protect. I let myself grieve everything, not just the woman I loved, but the sense of safety, the mutual dreams, and the feeling that love could conquer anything. It was a quiet, personal goodbye, one that didn't require anyone else's understanding or approval. Sitting there, letting every feeling wash over me, I discovered what it truly meant to accept loss, allowing myself to feel, then choosing to move forward with eyes open. As I faced those losses, something slowly shifted. Instead of feeling defeated or bitter, I began to see that change can be a gift, even when it's wrapped in heartache. I accepted that my life didn't look the way I imagined, but that didn't mean it couldn't still be good, or even better than before. The emptiness started to feel more like a blank slate than a black hole. Each day I found myself filling it with new routines, different hopes, and the freedom to decide for myself what mattered now. Accepting that everything had changed was terrifying, but it was also freeing. I stopped fighting the past and started looking ahead, trusting that the pain was shaping me into someone stronger, more honest, and more careful with my own heart. Letting go wasn't just about Sophia. It was about accepting myself and having the courage to build again, even in the face of uncertainty. That acceptance became the ground where my new life could finally take root. Just when it seemed like everything had finally settled into a quiet rhythm, life surprised me with an unexpected turn that changed everything. I received a formal letter from immigration, asking for more details about my relationship with Sophia. At first, I felt dread, thinking it was just another burden to carry. But as I pulled together the documents and timelines I'd saved, messages, photos, proof of my support, I realized I was actually prepared. I had done the work, faced the pain, and told the truth from the very beginning. Each piece of evidence was clear and organized, showing exactly what had happened between us. When I submitted my side, I felt an unusual sense of calm. For once, I was the one holding the facts, the proof, and the power to define what came next. The authorities took my case seriously, investigating Sophia's intentions. In the end, it protected me from any unwanted responsibilities, and shielded me from being tied further to her choices. That moment, standing up for myself, backed not by anger but by the truth, put me in a position of real strength. My story wasn't about heartbreak anymore. It was about resilience and integrity. I realized that everything I'd gone through, all the mistakes and the waiting and even the betrayal, had given me something no one could take away: the ability to fight for what was rightfully mine. The very process that brought me so much pain was now opening doors for me. At work, among friends, even in the choices I made for myself each day. I had learned to trust my voice and my instincts. The unexpected twist was that, for the first time in a long while, I wasn't just surviving what had happened. I was shaping my own future, free from fear or regret. It made me quietly proud to know that even the hardest stories can end in strength, and that sometimes justice finds you when you stand firmly in your own truth. When Sophia eventually tried to come back into my life, it wasn't a dramatic apology or tearful reunion like I might have imagined months earlier. Instead, she reached out with a careful message, claiming she missed our connection and hoping we could talk, maybe even start over as friends. Part of me thought about how I might have responded before, eager for answers or desperate for another chance at what was lost. But by then, too much had changed inside me. I recognized the pattern. Her reaching out wasn't about true regret or wanting to fix things. It was about her losing control, sensing her support system slipping, and trying to regain a place in the story she'd already walked away from. I didn't feel anger as I read her words, just a quiet certainty that I'd already moved past needing her approval or explanation. Without hesitation, I gave a calm but firm response. I explained that I didn't hold hatred, but I was no longer interested in reopening old wounds. I told her I was grateful for what I'd learned from our time together, but that the pain, the struggles, and the truth about how things ended meant that I needed the space to continue building my life without her. It was the first time I truly chose myself over the hope of what could have been, no longer blaming, no longer waiting for closure. When she tried again, offering excuses or small tokens of guilt, I stayed steady, refusing to be drawn back into confusion or uncertainty. The power she once had to shape my emotions was finally gone. I was prepared this time, not just with boundaries, but with a sense of self-worth I'd fought so hard to reclaim. Letting her go for good on my terms, was more than just moving on. It was proof that I had learned to protect my peace, trust my own growth, and put my future in my own hands where it belonged. Sophia didn't take no easily. After my firm response, she tried a new approach. A series of messages swinging between apology and guilt, sometimes pretending to care about how I was coping, other times dropping hints about her own struggles in the new city. She reminded me of old memories and inside jokes, as if bringing them up would warm me back to her side. Some messages were crafted with sympathy, while others accused me of being cold or unforgiving for not wanting to stay in touch. But this time, I saw her tactics for what they were, another way to test my boundaries and see if she could slip back into my life. Each word she sent sounded rehearsed, as if she had used these same strategies elsewhere. Instead of second-guessing myself, I reread her messages with clear eyes, trusting my restored self-respect and holding the line I'd drawn. The more she tried to manipulate the story, spinning her pain as proof that we belonged together or throwing blame back on me for shutting her out, the more certain I became. I responded with the same polite firmness as before. I hope you find peace and growth, but my life is headed in a different direction. Every attempt she made to draw out my guilt or sympathy only confirmed that I'd made the right choice. Friends who saw her efforts reached out to check that I wasn't falling back into old patterns. And while it made me sad to witness how little had changed in her approach, it also made me proud of how much I'd grown. I no longer felt pulled into her drama or responsible for her happiness. Exposing her final tricks, even just to myself, was the last clear sign that she could no longer bend my reality. I had learned to recognize manipulation for what it was, and choosing not to play along set me free in a way I'd never been before. The day I received notice that my case was officially closed and my name cleared marked a turning point I'll never forget. The legal process had been long, stressful, and full of moments where I doubted it would ever really be over. But the final letter recognized everything I had gone through. The authorities confirmed that I had acted in good faith, that Sophia's actions had been manipulative, and that I was not responsible for any consequences she faced as a result of her lies. There were no more obligations hanging over me. No more financial or emotional ties. Holding that letter in my hands, I felt a wave of relief that was almost overwhelming. I had finally, undeniably, done everything right by myself. The stress melted away as I realized I'd stood up for the truth, and the system had listened. For the first time since all of this began, I could breathe freely, knowing I was completely and officially free from everything Sophia tried to leave behind. The personal victory was even bigger. Looking back, I saw how far I had come from those first days of heartbreak and self-doubt. The recognition wasn't just about papers or official decisions. It was about reclaiming my own story, dignity, and trust in myself. Old wounds had been replaced by new wisdom, and even the scars served to make me stronger. The people I cared about respected how I'd handled everything, and I felt myself standing taller in every part of my life. Work became less about surviving and more about building. Friendships deepened, and I looked forward to new chances to love and be loved, not out of desperation or fear, but from a place of real confidence. Winning justice, both legally and personally, showed me that you can walk through betrayal and come out not just whole, but better. I learned that my pain wasn't the end. It was the start of something much more powerful, a future that belonged to me on my terms. Looking back on everything I went through, the betrayals, the heartbreak, and the endless questions, I can finally see what those struggles taught me. Before all of this, I believed that love meant giving everything you had, no matter the cost. I thought I could fix any problem with patience, sacrifice, and trust. But surviving this ordeal has shown me that real love needs more than hope and effort. It needs honesty, respect, and a partner who is as committed as you are. I learned that trusting my gut is important, especially when the facts don't add up. I used to think that admitting my doubts or setting boundaries meant I was weak or unloving, but now I know they are the first signs of self-respect. The pain taught me to value not just love itself, but the kind of love that makes you feel safe, seen, and respected. Betrayal was never something I would have chosen, but it became a powerful teacher. It forced me to look closely at myself, to see where I put others' needs before my own, and where I let fear keep me hanging on for too long. By facing what hurt the most, I discovered courage I never knew I had. I learned that healing isn't about forgetting or pretending it never happened, but about growing stronger with every lesson the pain leaves behind. Now, I understand that being wrong doesn't have to make you bitter or fearful. It can make you wise and brave if you let it. I stopped wishing things had gone differently and started trusting that I am exactly where I need to be, with a better sense of who I am and what I deserve. The hardest season of my life gave me clarity and strength I carry with me every day. It's a gift I never wanted, but one I will never give back. Coming through all of this has changed me in ways I could never have imagined. I'm not the same person who first fell for Sophia, believing that love alone was a reason to give every part of myself. The pain, loss, and lessons forced me to grow up, to become someone who can stand up for himself, even when everything feels uncertain. I became more aware of my own needs and limits. Instead of letting someone else define my worth, I learned to recognize it in myself. I no longer apologize for setting boundaries or saying no when something feels wrong. Trusting myself has become more important than looking for validation from someone else. I carry myself differently now, moving with a quiet confidence that comes from surviving something so difficult and coming out whole on the other side. This experience didn't just make me stronger, it made me more aware of how I move through the world and the relationships I choose. I pay attention to red flags, but I also don't let fear or bitterness close me off from new possibilities. I've learned to listen more closely, not just to what people say, but to how they show up. My honesty with others has deepened, and my honesty with myself has become non-negotiable. I take better care of my mental and emotional health, carving out time for self-reflection, growth, and activities that fill me with purpose. I can feel my resilience in every new challenge, in every day I wake up and choose to keep moving forward. I may have lost a relationship, but I gained something far greater, a self-worth that cannot be taken away by disappointment or betrayal. That strength stays with me, shaping my choices, my dreams, and the way I treat the people around me. If there's one lesson that stands above the rest, from everything I went through with Sophia, it's the importance of trusting my own strength and experience. I used to second-guess myself all the time, looking for outside approval or doubting my gut whenever things felt off. Through this painful journey, I realized that my instincts were nearly always right. I just needed to respect them. Every step I took toward healing came from listening to my own needs and honoring my feelings, even when they were messy or uncomfortable. I learned that no one knows what I need better than I do, and when I pay attention to my inner voice, I make healthier choices. This trust in myself didn't come overnight, but each decision to stand up for my boundaries, speak my truth, or walk away from what hurt me helped it grow stronger. By leaning on my own experience, I stopped giving away my power and started building a life that felt authentic and safe. Looking back, I see that the hardships, setbacks, and even failures were valuable not just for the things I survived, but for what they taught me about my own resilience. There is a kind of wisdom that only comes from living through tough times, a perspective you just can't borrow from others. I used to envy people who seemed unshakable. But now I know strength is built quietly, often in private, as you pick yourself up over and over again. My story with Sophia may have ended in disappointment, but my journey didn't stop there. Every lesson, every bit of pain, and every victory shaped me into someone who trusts his own path. I now understand that the life I'm creating, one choice at a time, comes from trusting what I've faced, survived, and learned. That belief doesn't just make me feel stronger, it gives me hope for whatever comes next, because I know I can face it with open eyes and an open heart. If I could share one final message with anyone listening, it would be this. Even in the darkest times, healing and justice are truly possible. When I was in the middle of the mess, abandoned, betrayed, and blamed, I thought I might never feel whole again. But showing up for myself every day, doing the hard emotional work, and steadily facing the truth brought me back stronger than I'd ever been. Justice didn't arrive all at once. It was a slow climb through honest conversations, legal battles, and the ongoing choice to protect my heart and future. Along the way, I learned that justice isn't just about proving someone wrong or seeing them punished. It's about being heard, believed, and defending the boundaries that protect your peace. True justice is the freedom to live in a way that is honest to your values, without fear, shame, or regret for standing up for yourself. Surviving what I did was hard, but it made me realize I could rise from situations that once felt unbeatable. I took back my power, step by step, until each day started to feel less like a fight and more like a new chance. What Sophia did was unfair and hurtful, but in the end, I was the one who defined how the story would finish. I am living proof that no matter how deep the betrayal, you can overcome it and come out even better than before. Real justice is possible, sometimes in ways you don't expect, through small victories, personal truth, and the steady rebuilding of hope. If you find yourself struggling after a betrayal, don't lose faith in your own strength. In time, you'll see that justice comes not only from outside, but from the way you choose to show up for yourself, every day. Now, when I look at my life, I see something I never thought I'd find again. Real control and peace. The chaos that followed Sophia's betrayal is gone, replaced by clarity and purpose. I wake up in the mornings with a sense of calm, knowing that where I am today is because of choices I made for myself, not because of someone else's promises or expectations. My decisions are my own, shaped by lessons I earned the hard way. Even the tough days don't scare me anymore. I trust myself. And because of that, the future feels wide open instead of threatening. My story used to revolve around someone else's needs. Now, it starts and ends with what makes me feel safe, proud, and fulfilled. I learned the power of setting boundaries, choosing new goals, and letting go of what I can't control. That freedom to design my days belongs only to me, and it's something no one can take away again. Walking this new path, I see every detail of my life as a reminder of how much I've grown. The small routines and simple joys matter more than ever. Drinking coffee by the window, planning weekends that have nothing to do with anyone else's agenda, quietly celebrating my own victories. People ask if I'd ever take Sophia back, and I realize now that the past has nothing more to offer me. My energy is spent building, not recovering. Taking control of my life wasn't just about moving on from the pain. It was about choosing joy, strength, and self-respect every single day. With each new step, I feel grateful for the lessons and prouder of who I have become. For the first time in a long time, I am exactly where I'm meant to be, living a future of my own design, and trusting that I will never hand over that power to anyone else again. True justice, I've come to realize, isn't just about someone being held accountable or seeing the person who hurt you face consequences. It's about reclaiming your own life and never letting another person's actions decide your worth. I used to think justice was something given from the outside, something handed down by others. But after everything I endured, I understand now that real justice is something earned from within. It's the quiet power that grows each time you stand up for yourself, make wise choices, and refuse to be defined by the cruelty or carelessness of someone else. The peace I feel today doesn't come from seeing Sophia experience regret or hardship. It comes from knowing I chose the truth, held on to my dignity, and rebuilt a life where no part of me is left in the shadows. Justice is freedom, the freedom to live true to yourself. As I move forward, what means the most is not what I lost, but all that I gained. I didn't just survive betrayal. I flourished in ways I never imagined, turning pain into growth and loss into self-worth. Now, justice means waking up each day and feeling proud of the person I see in the mirror, someone braver, wiser, and finally at peace. It's the certainty that, no matter what others do or say, I will always be in control of my story. The past is behind me, the lessons have been learned, and my future belongs to me alone. It took heartbreak to get here, but I wouldn't trade this sense of justice for anything. In the end, true justice is not a victory over someone else. It's winning yourself back.